Angry at God. The incredible power of forgiveness. The true message of the Book of Jonah by Dr. Mike Merrill. Introduction. My name is Hara. I am a survivor of the Holocaust. I am a Polish Jew who was relocated to Germany in 1937. I was an honest businessman. I fixed clocks and watches. I once even fixed the main central clock in the city of Warsaw, our capital. From the smallest locket clock to the largest tower clock, my eyes could see the smallest imperfections, and my fingers could make the tiniest adjustments. One night, the Nazis came to my town. They wanted any professional who knew any skill to help them. I did not trust them. I refused to go. They took my dear wife and my 2 daughters, made a circle around them, and kicked them and beat them until their faces were no longer recognizable. They told me exactly what they would do to them and every girl in my town if I did not go with them to help repair their clocks. They said, if I helped them, my family would be safe. I went with them. I never saw my wife or my daughters again, or any girl from my town for that matter. Not knowing what happened tears me up. I was beaten so badly, my eyes no longer focus. The Nazis broke all my fingers one by one to force me to give information about others in my town. I knew nothing, but eventually I made up lies to stop the torture. Some of the men I made up lies about were arrested and thrown in the prison with me. I saw 4 of my neighbors executed in front of my eyes, based on lies I told. The Nazis took my profession, my skills, my dignity, and all the loves of my life. My name is Hara. It is a Hebrew word that means rage. My name is Garabu. People call me Frank, but that is not my true name. It is Garabu. Now I am an old man, almost 96 years old. But I remember. I remember the stories about my grandfather, who was born in Africa 6 harvests after the great flood of the Niger. The white people call that year 1845. My father was very strong, very proud young African when he was captured by the slave traders. He was sold from one handler to another, and eventually brought to Mississippi. Because of my father's great strength, massive hands, and broad shoulders, his owners bred him with many women as if he was a majestic stallion or a mighty bull. When he was nearly 70, in 1864, he was forced to mate with my grandmother, who was 14 at the time. She wept throughout her pregnancy with my mother. My young grandmother died in bearing my mother into life. She was raised by her father, my strong, proud great-grandfather. My mother was threatened by my father not to have one more child, but she became pregnant with me. My father left town the day he found out she was pregnant with me. The white great-grandsons of the slave owner who bought my grandfather and bred him like an animal still live in my town. They have all forgotten the stories. But I have not forgotten. I still remember. We have never truly had a family, not like God intended men of the earth to have. We have been mistreated, handled, used as if we were tools, sold as property, and disgraced in every imaginable way. Now I am old. I am worthless. My true name is Garabu. It is Swahili for fury. It is not a strong enough name for me. I am a strong, proud African. I am not Frank. My name is Mara. I was raped by a man down our street who would come to my house to help my mother with chores. She worked 3 jobs to make enough for our apartment and food, but it was never enough. This man volunteered to help, and my mother believed he was a good man, but he really came just to rape me, more times than I can count. He told me if I ever told anyone, he would come after my little sister and do worse to her than he did to me. I knew he meant it. A few years ago, I got pregnant by this evil man. He took me to someone for an abortion that ruined me inside. I can never have my own babies. 3 years ago, when I was 15, I found out he was doing my little sister whenever I was gone from the house. I got so angry, I grabbed a knife from our kitchen, hunted that man down, and stabbed him as hard as I could. I did not kill him. I was the one arrested for assault and attempted murder. I told everyone that he had raped me many times, but no one believed me, not even my mother. I was thrown in some detention center because of my age. I just got out. I can't have babies. I can't get a job. I can't get an education. I lost my family and my future. My mother told me she never wanted to see me again because of my lies. I lost everything. That man still lives down our street. He still helps my mother with chores. My name is Mara. It means bitterness. My name is Dove. I am an ancient Jew from Israel, the tribe of Zebulun, the city of Gath-Hepher. I have seen such terrible things in my lifetime. Israel has been disobedient to the Lord, the God of our fathers, to be sure. We have assimilated to the cultures surrounding us, adopting the lifestyle and culture of those who hate Yahweh, so that we are indistinguishable from them. God has every right to judge us, to be sure. But our precious promised land, won through so many hard-fought battles by our great forefather Joshua, has been mercilessly destroyed by the most vile and filthy vermin, the Assyrians, that do not deserve to be called human. They are not. The armies of Assyria came swarming like rats from the north, out of the upper region of Mesopotamia. They murdered our women and our children in front of our very eyes, even while they cried for mercy. They slaughtered them, but not quickly, slowly, to maximize the agony and suffering of the victim and the observer. They chained fathers like animals near their dead wives and daughters, and let them slowly die of thirst in the sun. They prevented the men from the safety and peace of death, keeping them barely alive to deepen their personal pain beyond words or feelings. The Assyrians surrounded our beautiful cities and did not attack. They kept food and water from being delivered and waited while parents ate their children or children their friends to stay alive. And they laughed. They have made treaties with our worst enemies and violated even those agreements because they have no soul, no heart. They have even slaughtered their own families to the east in Babylon for the sole reason that they could do it. My name is Dove. In Hebrew, my name is Jonah. Introduction. a young man went forward at a religious youth camp, following the powerful evening message on forgiveness by the camp speaker. In fact, quite a few of the young men and women had also gone forward. This young man kind of sat at the far left end of the response area. I was the director of the camp event and was responsible for overseeing all of the teams that made this spectacular event happen. I went up with several other staff members to listen, talk, and pray with these young people who had gone forward. No one else had gone over to the left side near this young guy, so I made my way over there. I made the presumption that this particular young man was seeking forgiveness for himself, having in his mind and heart certain specifics for which he felt some pangs of guilt. He probably wanted to confess some wrongs done, repent, and turn a new direction, and sense the gracious forgiveness that God was offering. I could not have been more wrong. Very fortunately, my internal presumptions did not interfere with what was actually happening. Part of my role as camp director was to assist young people seeking a spiritual or personal resolution of some kind. I had learned not to open a conversation by setting out my presumptions and directing the conversation from my end. I allowed a few seconds of silence as I sat next to this young man. As I sat beside him, at a glance I realized this late adolescent person was the son of a pastor I knew quite well. I also had known this young man through various events that had occurred over the recent half-dozen years. This kid was, quote, a good kid. So what terrible sins was he about to confess? Or would he even accept the inestimable risk of opening up to me, the camp director, and a colleague of his father? In 7 seconds flat, this young man presented one of the most challenging statements that far exceeds the limitations of religion and the boundaries of theological philosophy. I was well trained in all that stuff. In 7 seconds, he presented a conflict so huge, an issue so potent, that I was never again quite able to achieve the comfortable cockiness of having all the answers, or at least most of them, or so I thought back then. After the momentary quiet, in 7 seconds, this profound young man said simply, I don't need God's forgiveness. God needs my forgiveness. He displayed no discernible emotion. He didn't cry or shout or spit. He didn't shudder or swallow hard. He was calm. He was honest. But he also seemed to have a brutality in his demeanor. He appeared to be searching my face to see how I would respond, how I might react to this definitive announcement. My mind was racing at the speed of a flash of lightning. I instantly knew I had only 1 second to formulate a best response. But what could that possibly be? The calmness of his voice as he said these words, which I had never heard from anyone ever, communicated this was a reality, a conclusion he had reached after a great deal of thought. He was not being flippant or rebellious. He was stating a fact from his point of view that was clearly agonizing for him. With barely 1 second to contemplate all my options, I decided it was not right to turn this dump truck around and have it dump the load back on him. He did not deserve or desire for me to challenge his arrogance, quote a few Bible verses, recite a couple of traditional truisms about the worm-like status of human beings before Almighty God, or inform him how sinful his accusation of God really is. I pursed my lips slightly and nodded a bit. That's interesting, I said, using my go-to phrase to avoid saying anything when I have to say something. God needs your forgiveness. I simply repeated his last statement as plainly as he did. Good counseling technique when you have no idea what to say that would be helpful. What does that mean to you? It means I'm probably going to hell, he said matter-of-factly. Everyone tells me I cannot accuse God like this. God never does anything wrong. I'm the one who is wrong. You probably agree, don't you? Actually, no, I don't agree. I have been angry at God before, really angry. But I never thought about God needing my forgiveness. That's one of the most profound thoughts I have ever heard. This young man seemed genuinely surprised by that response. So, I am allowed to get angry at God? He gets angry at me when I do something wrong. Can I get angry at God when he does something wrong? Again, my mind raced. I had two paths between which I could choose to step next in this conversation, but I could only take one of them. I would never be able to return to that particular fork in the road and try the one not taken to see if it worked out any better. Two options: angry at God, or God does something wrong. I had to pick just one. You are angry at God, you said. What does that mean? I asked first. That turned out to be a lucky guess. I am angry at God, he said almost humbly, glancing away from me. It's because of what God didn't do that I am so angry at him. I didn't ask why you are angry. I asked, what does being angry at God mean? Here the reconstruction of this conversational inquiry gets lost in the fuzziness of distant memory. I don't recall how this young man answered that question. I only recall asking it. But since that time, I have met many people who struggle profoundly with anger at God. Many. Most people have not defined what they actually mean by being angry at God. Commonly, when it's possible to converse about what that anger means, people maneuver into the reasons why they're so angry at God, at everyone, at life. Most people won't talk about it. They won't even admit they are angry at God. They fear they'll be struck by a bolt of lightning if they admit to being angry at God. They'll be condemned by the righteous people and religious leaders in their lives if they confess ownership of anger at God. They cannot embrace their anger, and they cannot resolve it. That is what this book is about. Turns out this young man was not selfish in his anger at God. He wasn't rebellious or bitter. He was deeply wounded and confused. He had a desire to love God like he had been repeatedly taught, and love his neighbor as himself, as he had been taught. He wanted to obey God with all his strength and mind and heart. But he was so damned angry. Little sharpened shards of his story came out over the next day or so. He had a younger sister, a sweet child who was lovely in appearance and temperament. She got a wicked form of cancer that children should not ever get. The family prayed for her healing. The whole church prayed. People in other churches prayed. In other states. In other countries. This young man, then around 11 years old, prayed. He claimed the verses of promise the adults had taught him and quoted often. He believed positively. He never doubted that God could heal her. He volunteered to take her cancer into his own body so she could be free. He prayed and believed. He did not bargain with or threaten God. His sister died. Not a lovely death either. God didn't heal her. He didn't block the cancer. He didn't use his power and wisdom and love and power, did I mention power already? To heal that lovely little girl even after everyone had prayed so diligently and righteously. It took a while for the grief to flood over him and saturate his entire family and church. Finally, the tears were gone. The casseroles were consumed. The warm hugs and sympathies were done. Then the anger grew in its place. Before that youth camp was over, I felt I had to provide that young man with something tangible that could validate his legitimate anger. I considered philosophy. I considered psychology. I considered history. I considered logic. I considered religion. Late that night, I stumbled upon the Book of Jonah. Jonah, the guy in the whale, or the fish, or sea monster, or whatever it was. I read the 48 verses of the entire Book of Jonah, and there I found that Jonah also admits to being angry at God. Legitimately angry. And God talks with him about it, without condemning Jonah or blasting him off the earth with a bolt of lightning. That is what this book is about. Thanks for reading or listening so far. If you want to quit, now would be a good time to do that. The Book of Jonah covers some extremely difficult aspects, some extremely difficult emotional challenges of the human journey. And we're going that way.